Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, Chatting with ISO Experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Norm Verbeck, consultant and fan favorite, again from here at Core. Glad you could join us again today, Norm. How are you doing?
Great. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. We're really glad to have you here again. Now, this week's podcast is going to be talking about ISO certification versus compliance. What's the big difference? What does one entail versus another? But before we dig into that, let's first learn a little bit about our guest, Norm. Can you share a little bit about yourself, Norm?
Sure. So I've been with Core Business Solutions for about 4.5 years now. Mm-hmm. Previously, I worked for two larger manufacturing companies, one in the printing industry and one in the door manufacturing industry.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to have you here. And I do have another question for you. What is your favorite beverage?
Favorite beverage?
Could be an adult beverage or not.
Sure. Let's go with just craft beer in general.
Craft beer? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I like a good craft beer every now and then.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. All right. Now moving on to what we're here for. Let's get started. And is it possible for an organization to benefit from implementing 9001, but not get the certification? And if so, how?
So the difference, and we're going to talk about the differences as we kind of go, but yes, there are definitely some benefits a company can achieve through being compliant versus actually pursuing official certification.
Okay.
So some of the benefits when you do have a, kind of compliant quality management system set up, it's going to basically help to improve your operational efficiency if it's being used properly, and the buy-ins there from the whole team.
Right.
It also helps with identification and hopefully then mitigation of risks.
Okay.
So,
that's important.
Yes. Again, it's important to kind of identify what are the main areas that, kind of affect your business, and then try to put some things in place to help mitigate those.
Right. Or I think we call them risks or opportunities. Maybe look at something as an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Because basically your risks are areas and opportunities for you to improve and try to mitigate those.
Right.
So
right.
It can also enhance a company's reputation by being compliant, as this demonstrates, again, a commitment to quality, demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement as well. And the final one I would probably say is you can avoid the cost of certification if compliance is basically an area that your business at this point only needs to get to. You're not having any customers or contractual requirements that might require certification.
Right. So you're not looking at the cost of certification and surveillance audits after the fact and things like that.
That's correct.
So it might be kind of obvious, but how does one become compliant versus certified?
So again, to be compliant, you have to basically first purchase a copy of the ISO 9001 standard, because you have to understand and be knowledgeable on what you're trying to get compliant to. And then basically on those requirements, you have to obviously set up a quality management system that is meeting all those requirements.
Okay.
To be officially compliant, though, once you have everything in place, you have to also conduct management reviews as a team to review the system, your quality management system, to make sure, you're basically monitoring, addressing any issues as they come up. And the final piece is pretty much going through and conducting your own internal audit. Okay. So once you go through an internal audit internally, which you have to have at least at a minimum of 2 people, because conducting audits internally, you can't have anybody auditing their own areas of responsibility.
Right.
So at a bare minimum, you would need 2.
Okay.
But once you get through the internal audit and you address any shortcomings or nonconformances with corrective actions, at that point, you would be able to state that, yes, you are in compliance.
Okay. And if you're a smaller company, we have the ability to help with internal audits and stuff too. So let's say you only have 2 or 3 people in the company. Well, maybe you can get somebody else to help with those internal audits if you want the compliance portion of that.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much where compliance stops. The official certification, that's done by a third party.
Right.
Even though, we would be an external company that could do your internal audits. But when we talk about certification, it's actually an official third party called a registrar that they're accredited by certain bodies to do those audits.
Right. And the person that's auditing you is going to not only know what they need to audit from the standard perspective, but they're also going to be an auditor that is familiar with your market. Correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's really, really helpful. So how does it affect one's market perception if you're only compliant versus getting certified?
So compliance is not generally viewed as well as certification.
Okay.
It's not internationally recognized. Where certification to ISO 9001, that's internationally recognized across
global
hundreds of countries. Yes. Yeah. The other thing is you may not be able to, if there's any contractual requirements, typically they're requiring certification. Mm-hmm. So if you're only compliant, you wouldn't be able to bid on those contracts.
Okay.
Or if there's certain customers that, they could have their own requirement. Some companies require their suppliers to be certified to the standard. So if that's a requirement, you wouldn't be able to obtain new work from some customers that might require certification. But certified companies, at the end of the day, once you are certified, you can be found either by like the registrar's website, or there's actually websites from the accreditation bodies as well.
So people can look for people that are specifically certified. But if you're only compliant, you're not going to be on this.
That's correct. Yep. So that is also, another kind of marketing piece as well. So companies just won't be able to find you if you're only compliant.
Right.
But companies that stay at a compliant level versus a certification level, another area is you have to consider is if you're ever audited by your customer. So some customers will audit their suppliers periodically. And basically they have a checkbox that if you are certified, that basically providing a certificate sometimes will basically eliminate the need for them to come
for the
audit
because you're already being audited through a certification.
That's correct.
Are there any positives to market perception? Like maybe you said companies, you might not be able to bid on it, or you might be required to have certification. Or some people say, hey, if you're compliant, that's good enough. Like if you're a supplier for somebody.
So, it's definitely positive to be compliant. Absolutely. It's just not quite as effective as being certified.
Gotcha.
But being compliant, you're basically, again, it's more self-promoting at that point.
Right.
There's no area where somebody can go find your company for, a list of companies that are certified.
And they're just going to have to assume, too, that you're meeting all the criteria that you say you
That's right. It's kind of a you're basically self-attesting that you meet the requirements versus an independent company coming in for certification to audit you and basically certify that you are meeting the requirements of the standard.
Yep. Completely clear. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of maintaining ISO 9001 without seeking certification? We sort of talked about it a little bit, with the marketing part. What are some other ways?
So as far as the advantages go, generally with compliance, there's less cost and time commitment. Specifically, you don't have the third-party audits. That definitely, there's a cost associated and there is a time commitment for that. Another area is it could potentially meet the customer requirements, but you need to verify with your customer because, again, compliance does kind of sound synonymous with certification, but there is a difference.
So there needs to be some clarification there with your suppliers or customers.
Yes, it can be as effective as certification. It's just kind of dependent on the level of support from your team within the company.
I could certainly see where there can be some lackadaisicalness to it when you are compliant and, things get busy. It's like, well, we can push that. We don't really have anybody coming and looking at it. We're doing it ourselves. And you can probably be complacent a little bit if you're not really looking at those certifications.
Definitely. And that can kind of fall under the disadvantages a little bit. So compliant, there is a little bit more complacency versus if there's a third party coming in, there's a deadline.
Yeah.
You have to make sure you've done certain things, which the things in the standard that you should be doing, they're generally things they're good business practices.
Right.
Again, if it's an effective system, you should be doing those things anyways. It's just another day when they're coming in to certify you.
Yep.
They're just making sure, you do what you say.
Yep. So. And I know that we've talked about in the past, I think it was with the Sue Strasser, that it's easier if you build some of those things into what you're already doing and taking credit for what you're already doing. So as long as you're staying on top of it and making sure it's meeting what you need as far as documentation and other things within the standard and things like management review and things like that.
Yep. So that's the advantages. The main disadvantages as far as being compliant versus officially getting certified is there is no international recognition of compliance.
That can be a disadvantage for sure.
You are more likely, like we talked about a little bit ago, for a customer audit. So, customers will audit their suppliers. If you are only compliant, that's more likely versus if you're certified, that might not be applicable because they basically kind of consider that the audit.
You've already been audited.
Yep, that's correct. And then there could be a potential loss of opportunity, either with a potential customer or a contract, depending on if there's requirements associated with those.
And it's one of those things, I mean, you can probably look at an interview. If you have somebody that, well, I did all the courses, but I didn't quite get my degree, versus somebody that actually got the degree.
That's correct. Yes.
And that can be here and there, but, are you looking at, okay, here we have the piece of paper, here we don't.
Yes, basically the difference between saying that I attended this university versus a graduate of this university. Yep.
I know we talked about it a little bit, but what are the actual cost savings and implications of achieving compliance versus certification?
Okay, so compliance generally requires less time and less expense. It's more of an internal cost at that point because it's your employees' time and there's a cost associated with their time.
Right.
Compliance would not result in costs for the certification audits, specifically like maintaining the system with the auditor, whatever registrar you're using, and also then travel costs as well. So there are some travel costs depending on the company. Some companies are more service-based where, a lot of the services they're providing nowadays are virtual or remote. So some audits can be remote, so you don't really have the travel costs in there. But manufacturing companies or production-related companies, those are typically more on-site audits. So there could be travel costs association. Certification includes ongoing maintenance costs and can have travel costs depending on the business type, like we were talking about. Some business types, they are more suitable, like we mentioned, to the remote audits, but again, it's not always the case.
Okay. So how does internal auditing differ between organizations aiming for compliance versus those seeking certification?
So internal auditing, it's a requirement of the standard whether you're compliant, if you're claiming compliance, or if you're certified. So it really should not differ between compliant companies or certified companies.
Okay.
That's your internal employees auditing your system. Or like you mentioned, if you're a smaller company, you can actually outsource the internal audit to like a company like Core Business Solutions. So we do internal audits for companies all the time.
Yeah, and there's benefits to doing that where you literally have an outside source that can give you some pointers too.
Absolutely.
So you might not see. That's one of the benefits of that you might not have when you have an internal auditor.
That's correct. So it's an outside body. It's a separate set of eyes. It's kind of not involved with the day-to-day activities within a process. So you don't have to worry about that. Also, part of the requirement of the standard, even if you're compliant, is that there's no basically conflict of interest. So you can't be auditing things that you have responsibilities or ownership of. So where again, a company like us, if you're a smaller company and you just don't really have the time, we can do that for you and there's no conflict of interest at all. So it's also a requirement to ensure impartiality, but if you truly meet the requirements of the standard, so internal audits, even when you're compliant, it's not a one and done thing. So once you audit yourself and you say you're compliant, the standard basically it's a periodic basis is when they occur, and typically they're once a year. If you were going for official certification, you have to be audited every year anyways, and the internal audit would take place between audits with the registrar. So typically once a year.
So, but I guess you could, if you're just being compliant and you did them once, are you still compliant if you don't in year two? No, I'm saying I could see where that might be some differing, like, well, we did it last year. Nothing's really changed.
That's correct.
We can get by without doing it again because we really haven't had that much change, where if you're certified, well, yeah, that does have to happen.
That's correct. Because in the standard, there's a lot of references to periodically doing certain things, managing and evaluating qualifying suppliers. That's kind of a periodic basis that you have to do. Kind of review of documents. So your document control, you have to show periodic review again. And
customer feedback.
That's right. Monitoring customer feedback, perception. That's kind of a continuous ongoing thing that you need to be proactive about.
So that would probably be one of the, going back to disadvantages and advantages. You're not going to be forced to make those changes if you're compliant. You're saying you're doing it, but again, I think it's the complacency part of it. Not that you can't stay compliant, but you really have to probably have somebody, one or two people, or somebody that really is dedicated to this, even though you're not certified, that you're still going to stay compliant to it and not be complacent and just, we'll put that on the back burner because X, Y, Z.
That's correct. Because when you are certified, you have to show ongoing evidence of all these things, which you should be doing those anyways if you're compliant. But again, complacency sometimes comes into play.
Well, business happens. So
that's right. Everybody gets busy because they have the day-to-day operations. So
it's like, what is it? The old saying, the cobbler's kids never get, their shoes have holes in them. It's that kind of thing.
That's right.
Where you're too busy doing something else. You can't really take care of your own space, your own home, your own business from that perspective, at least. Oh, they're good enough.
That's right.
So certification is probably a better call there. Do you have any other thoughts determining whether you should do compliance and certification? You sort of mentioned it's one of those things that if you don't need to be certified, no one's requiring you, maybe compliance is a good place. Is that a good place to start too, or?
It is. So at the end of the day, the requirement of customers or contracts are one thing, but there's another kind of second piece that you just might not really realize is, there could be potential business, maybe inquiries that you're not even getting from customers because they're only looking for companies that are certified.
Yeah.
So, you may not have a requirement from customers, but there could be customers who are just passing you by because they require
you don't really
certification.
Know.
You would not know.
Yeah, they didn't even look. They didn't even give you a call.
That's right.
Because they knew you weren't certified.
Yep.
Let me give you a hypothetical here. Let's say something's coming down the pike and one of your suppliers is going to require you to be certified. You get a little bit of wind of that, but it's only 2 or 3 years down the road. Maybe now's the time to start looking into compliance and maybe just not pushing the button on getting certified.
You could. If you truly have an effective system that's compliant, like it should just be basically just scheduling the audit with a registrar for certification.
So you can push some of the costs down the road a little bit maybe, but still gain all the benefits. And there are a ton of benefits from being compliant or certified that we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast for 2.5 years. There's reasons why people do become compliant and not certified because of those benefits.
That's correct.
That ISO 9001 brings to you.
And there's absolutely benefits. There's definitely, again, it's more self-promotion at that point with a compliant company versus somebody being able to look you up to see if you're certified. So.
Right. One other question, and this is just a quick one. Do you see companies with other standards other than just 9001 doing compliance versus certification?
Yes. So there are a couple other standards that really lend into, depending on the type of business, but ISO 45001, which is occupational health and safety, that's something you have to be, that's a regulatory requirement. You have OSHA requirements. A lot of the things you're already doing.
Right.
So they become compliant with 45001 because
but they're not necessarily need to get certified.
That's right.
Okay.
So
any standard technically you could be compliant and not certified if you chose.
Environmental for 14,001 would be another one. 45,001, but yes.
27,001 when it comes to
for information security.
Information security. Yep. Okay. Well, this has been great and really insightful. Appreciate you being here again. Do you have any last thoughts on anything?
No, either way, compliance versus certification, they're both very worthwhile. Starting on your path to journey to a good quality management system.
Yep. And we can help you no matter where you're at.
Absolutely.
Well, really appreciate you being here. Thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure.
I want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today, and we hope that it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, how we can help you with ISO certification or compliance, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. Or you can reach out and visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. If you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.